Once upon a time, in the bustling city of Jos, high on the rocky plateau of north-central Nigeria, the evening wind carried the smell of roasted maize and the distant sound of Hausa drums from a wedding across town. Under the dim, orange glow of street lamps, John Adewale walked slowly along the narrow road that led from the busy terminus market to the quieter streets of Old Bukuru. To anyone watching, he looked like an ordinary young man, dusty jeans, faded black hoodie, and shoes that had long lost their shine. But John was anything but ordinary. At 29, John was the only son of Prince Adebayo Adewale, a billionaire businessman whose hotels glittered from Abuja to London. John's skin was the warm brown of polished mahogany, his eyes sharp but kind, the kind that could cut through a lie or melt a heart. Yet, behind those eyes lived a private wound. Money had followed him since birth, but love had always run away. From boarding school in Kaduna to university in Lagos, women smiled at his face and worshipped his father's name. Every "I love you" came wrapped in the same silent question: how much can he spend on me? He longed for a love that would see John the man, not John the billionaire prince. But each year ended the same way: gifts returned, bank alerts sent, hearts broken. Tonight, the chilly Harmattan wind scraped against his cheek like dry paper, reminding him of his loneliness. He pulled the hoodie tighter, hiding the fine wristwatch he had deliberately chosen for its scratched face. The smell of suya peppered meat, sizzling on charcoal, floated toward him, mixing with the diesel fumes of KK Napep tricycles. Somewhere far off, a muezzin's call to prayer stretched across the night like a sad violin. John stopped in front of a small kiosk where an old woman sold steaming cups of kunu. "Good evening, Mama," he greeted softly. She looked up, eyes warm. "Good evening, son. You look tired. Market no easy today?" John smiled faintly. "Market is never easy, Mama." He paid for a cup, letting the sweet millet drink burn gently down his throat. "This is where I belong tonight," he thought. "Among people who don't know my name." For months he had planned this night. No security, no expensive car, no polished shoes. Just John Adewale, dressed like a man who slept under the bridge. He wanted to see the world without the shield of wealth, to know if true kindness still lived in the hearts of strangers. As he sipped the kunu, a sudden gust of wind carried the scent of rain, though the sky was clear. He took it as a sign. The test would begin. Across the road, a young woman struggled with a broken tray of oranges, plastic fruits scattered onto the wet pavement as motorcycles zoomed by. Her wrapper was soaked from earlier drizzles, her sandals barely holding together. John crossed quickly and helped her pick the oranges, ignoring the mud that splashed onto his jeans. "Thank you, brother," she said, breathing hard. Her voice was soft, musical, carrying the faint rhythm of plateau English. "No problem," John replied. Up close, he noticed the faint scent of palm oil on her hands and the tiny scar above her left eyebrow. Real. Human. Not polished. "My name is Hawa," she offered shyly. "I sell here every evening after school." John nodded. But before he could speak further, a black Lexus SUV screeched to a stop beside them. Two laughing young men in designer shirts leaned out of the windows, their colognes flooding the night air. One of them called to Hawa, "Fine girl, leave that broke guy and come join real men." John felt Hawa stiffen. The SUV doors opened. The men stepped out, their gold chains catching the streetlight. One of them smirked at John's dusty shoes and torn hoodie. "Baba, a beg shift," he said mockingly. "Let better people help this fine girl." The wind grew colder. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rumbled even though no storm clouds showed. John stayed silent, his mind replaying a lifetime of fake smiles from women who chased men like these. Hawa looked from the rich strangers to John's calm face. For a long second, the only sound was the hiss of roasting suya and the restless honk of a passing taxi. Then she bent, picked up the last orange, and placed it firmly on her tray. "Thank you for stopping," she said politely to the men. but I don't follow strangers. Please leave." The smirk on the leader's face twisted into anger. He stepped closer, his expensive shoes splashing muddy water onto John's trousers. "Do you know who I am?" he barked. John raised his eyes slowly, his heartbeat steady. "Do you know who I am?" he almost replied, but held the words behind his teeth. The night felt electric, like the city itself was holding its breath. The first drop of rain splashed on the dusty pavement, like a warning from the heavens. Another drop followed, and then another, until a thin silver curtain began to fall over the busy Jos Street. People rushed to pull nylon covers over their market tables. Motorcycles revved and disappeared into the wet night. The Lexus driver didn't move. His gold chain glistened as the rain soaked his crisp white shirt. He stepped even closer to John, his eyes hard. "Baba," I said, shift. He barked again, his voice carrying over the hiss of the sudden downpour. "You think you fit stand for my front because of this girl? You no fear?" John remained still. The rain slid down his hoodie, tracing cold lines across his neck. Inside, his heartbeat stayed steady, like a silent drum. He had faced boardrooms full of billionaire investors. A street bully was nothing. But tonight, he wasn't a prince. He was a man pretending to be a nobody. He could not call his driver. He could not flash the Adewale name. He had to stand like an ordinary man or walk away. Beside him, Hawa gripped her tray of oranges with trembling fingers. The scent of wet fruit rose into the damp air. "Sir, please," she said softly, her voice barely audible over the rain. "There is no trouble here." The driver sneered. "Then tell your friend to move." John finally spoke, his voice low but sharp enough to cut through the rain. "She said there's no trouble," he said. "Respect that, and go." For a heartbeat, the world froze. Then the second man from the Lexus laughed loudly. "A beggar with mouth. Omo. See this guy? Ooh." He slapped his friend's shoulder and grinned. "Make we go Jer. This one no worth am." The leader's jaw tightened, but he gave a short, angry hiss and turned away. Both men jumped back into the SUV, tires hissing on the wet road as they sped off, leaving a trail of muddy water. Hawa exhaled sharply, her shoulders sinking. "Thank you," she whispered. Her eyes searched John's face. "You could have walked away. Why didn't you?" John looked at her for a long moment, rain dripping from the edge of his hood. "Because some things are worth standing for," he said simply. Hawa lowered her eyes, a faint blush creeping across her cheeks. The rain softened to a gentle drizzle. The market lights flickered like sleepy stars. John helped Hawa rearrange the rescued oranges on her tray. Each fruit shone wet and bright, like tiny suns. "Where do you stay?" he asked. "Bukuru," she replied. "My auntie's house near the old railway. It's far. I usually walk." John frowned slightly. "In this rain?" She gave a small shrug. "I'm used to it. Keek costs too much at night." He wanted to offer money for a ride, but that would break the test. He was supposed to be a man with nothing. "I'll walk with you," he said instead. Hawa looked surprised. "It's far. I like walking." She studied his face for a moment, then nodded. As they began the long trek toward Bukuru, the city unfolded around them like a wet painting. Diesel fumes mixed with the sweet smell of roasted corn. The sound of distant drums floated between the thunderclouds. John's shoes squelched in the puddles, but he didn't care. Every step beside Hawa felt strangely peaceful. After a few minutes, Hawa broke the silence. "So, what do you do?" she asked. John's lips curved slightly. It was the question he had been waiting for. "I do small jobs here and there," he replied carefully. "Nothing big." Hawa nodded slowly. "No shame in small jobs," she said. "My father used to say, better a small, honest life than a big, dishonest one." John glanced at her, impressed by the quiet wisdom in her voice. "And you?" he asked. I'm studying accounting at Plateau State Polytechnic, she said. I sell oranges to pay my fees. John's heart tightened. No gold chains, no designer clothes, just quiet ambition and hard work. They walked in companionable silence until they reached a narrow footbridge. Beneath it, a small river swirled with muddy rainwater. The wooden planks creaked under their weight. Halfway across, Hawa stopped. Sometimes, she said softly, I wonder if anyone will ever love me for me, not for what I can give, not for how much I can serve. John felt the words strike deep inside his chest. They were his own secret fear mirrored in her eyes. Before he could answer, a flash of lightning split the sky, painting her face in silver light. The rain returned, heavier this time, drumming on the bridge like 1,000 tiny drums. John opened his mouth to speak, but a sudden shout cut through the storm. Hey, you two! They turned quickly. 3 rough-looking men emerged from the shadows at the far end of the bridge, their silhouettes dark against the flickering street lamp. One held a wooden stick, another swung a rusty chain. The leader grinned, his teeth flashing white in the rain. Good night, fine people, he called mockingly. Where una they go for this kind, dark evening? Hand over your phones and money. Hawa's breath caught in her throat. Her tray of oranges trembled. John's heart kicked hard against his ribs. This was no playful street banter. This was danger. And he was supposed to be a broke man, with no driver, no bodyguards, and no way to call for help. The rain hammered harder against the wooden planks of the old bridge, drumming like 1,000 restless hearts. Cold water streamed down John Adewale's neck, soaking his hoodie until it clung to his skin. Beside him, Hawa held her tray of oranges like a fragile shield. The 3 men moved closer, their wet slippers slapping against the wood. The leader, a tall man with a scar across his left cheek, twirled a rusty chain around his wrist. Good evening, lovers, he said with a sneer. His voice carried the lazy drawl of someone who enjoyed fear. Rainy night, quiet bridge, perfect for sharing gifts. Drop everything you have. The second man, shorter but broad like a wrestler, tapped the wooden stick against the railing. The sound was sharp and cruel, each knock echoing across the rushing water below. John stepped slightly in front of Hawa. I don't want trouble, he said calmly. His words were soft, but his eyes were steady. We have nothing. The scarred man tilted his head. Nothing? He pointed the chain at John's wrist. Then what's that? Even in this darkness, I can see that wristwatch. Remove it. John's stomach tightened. The scratched watch was the only item betraying his hidden wealth. It wasn't expensive by his standards, but to these men it would feed a family for weeks. Hawa's voice trembled. Please, we're just trying to go home. Let us pass. The short man laughed, a harsh, barking sound. No one passes without paying toll. Lightning flashed across the sky, turning the river below into a sheet of angry silver. John's mind raced. I can fight. Years of private martial arts lessons whispered through his muscles, but revealing his training would shatter his disguise. Calling for help was useless. The nearest street was too far. He took a slow breath, remembering his father's voice. A true prince protects, even when he must hide his crown. The leader stepped closer, chain swinging lazily. Last chance, he said. Wristwatch, girl's bag, or we take more than that. Hawa's fingers tightened on John's sleeve. Her eyes begged for safety, but she didn't cry. John lowered his voice until only she could hear. When I say run, he whispered. You run. Don't look back. Her eyes widened. Run where? Just trust me. The scarred man lifted the chain. Now, John shouted. He shoved Hawa sideways, knocking the tray of oranges into the air. Fruits exploded across the wet planks like tiny yellow meteors. Before the men could react, John charged forward. He grabbed the leader's wrist, twisting sharply. The chain clattered to the ground. The man howled in pain as John's elbow slammed into his chest. The wrestler swung the wooden stick. John ducked, the stick grazing his shoulder. Adrenaline burned through his veins. A swift kick to the wrestler's knee sent him stumbling into the railing. "Run, Hawa!" John roared. But Hawa didn't move. She crouched near the fallen tray, frantically scooping scattered oranges into her skirt. "Leave them!" John shouted. The third man, a skinny figure lurking at the back, lunged toward Hawa. John spun and blocked him with a hard shove, sending the man skidding across the wet planks. The leader recovered and grabbed John's hoodie from behind. The fabric tore with a loud rip. John twisted, driving a sharp punch into the man's stomach. The thug doubled over, gasping for breath. Then came the distant wail of a police siren. Red and blue lights flickered faintly at the far end of the bridge. Someone from the market must have called for help. The three men exchanged quick, panicked glances. Without a word, they bolted into the darkness, splashing through puddles as they vanished into the night. The bridge fell silent, except for the rain and Hawa's rapid breathing. John bent over, hands on his knees, chest heaving. His knuckles throbbed. Water streamed down his face, mixing with sweat. Hawa ran to him, eyes wide with shock. "Are you hurt?" she asked. John shook his head, still catching his breath. "I'm fine. Are you?" She nodded quickly, though her hands trembled as she clutched the rescued oranges against her chest. You fought like a soldier," she whispered. John forced a small smile. "Just lucky." But Hawa wasn't fooled. Her gaze lingered on his stance, the clean precision of his movements. "That wasn't luck," she said softly. Before John could answer, a flashlight beam swept across the bridge. Two uniformed police officers appeared, their boots splashing through the puddles. "Are you two okay?" one of them called. "Yes," Hawa replied quickly. "They ran away." The officer nodded, eyes scanning the darkness. "Be careful. These thieves have been troubling this area for weeks." The officers disappeared back into the rain, their footsteps fading into the night. For a long moment, John and Hawa stood in silence, the storm softening to a gentle drizzle. Finally, Hawa spoke. "You said you have nothing," she said quietly, "but you fight like someone who has everything to lose." John looked at her, searching for words. Rainwater dripped from the torn edge of his hoodie. "Some things," he said slowly, "are worth protecting, even if you can't explain why." Hawa studied him, her hazel brown eyes reflecting the weak glow of the street lamps. She wanted to ask more, but instead she simply nodded. They began walking again, the muddy path squelching beneath their feet. The city around them was quieter now, as if Jos itself had paused to listen. Half an hour later, they reached a small junction where a flickering sign read Bukuru Railway close. The narrow street beyond was lined with low houses and scattered mango trees. "This is where I live," Hawa said, stopping in front of a blue metal gate. John looked at the modest house behind the gate, faded paint, a single warm light glowing in the window. "Thank you for walking with me," she said softly. "If you hadn't been there." Her voice trailed off. John gave a faint smile. "I should be the one thanking you. Not many people would stand with a stranger in the rain." Hawa hesitated. "You're not like most people I meet here. Who are you really?" John met her eyes. For a heartbeat, he considered telling the truth, that he was the heir to a billionaire empire, a prince hiding behind a torn hoodie. But the test wasn't over. "Just a man," he said quietly. "Maybe a friend, if you'll allow it." Hawa's lips curved into a small, uncertain smile. "Maybe," she said. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small piece of paper, quickly writing something with a short pencil. "My phone number," she said, handing it to him, "in case you need oranges again." John accepted the paper, careful to keep his fingers from trembling. "Good night, Hawa." "Good night, John." The gate creaked as she slipped inside. The warm light swallowed her silhouette. John stood alone in the rain, the paper damp in his hand, his heart beating with a rhythm he hadn't felt in years. A single thought echoed in his mind. She still doesn't know who I am, and I don't know if she would stay if she did. The phone vibrated again, a sharp hum against the soaked fabric of John Adewale's hoodie. Rainwater streaked across the cracked screen, but the name still glowed like a silent alarm. Father. Prince Adebayo Adewale never called this late unless the world itself demanded attention. John's thumb hovered over the answer button, his heart a slow, heavy drum. He glanced back at the blue gate where Hawa had disappeared. The warm light from her auntie's house flickered softly, as if urging him to stay grounded in this quiet, ordinary night. But the buzzing in his hand was a reminder of the life he could never fully escape. He swiped to answer. "Good evening, Father," he said carefully. The deep baritone voice on the other end was as commanding as ever. "John, where are you?" "I'm taking a walk," John replied. "Is something wrong?" A brief pause. Rain hissed between the silence. "I just received a call from Chief Balogun," his father said. "He told me you canceled tomorrow's meeting with the board. That deal is worth billions. Why would you—" "I needed time," John interrupted softly. "Time?" His father's voice sharpened. "You are the heir to everything I have built. Investors are waiting. Newspapers are already asking questions. You cannot disappear like a common street boy." The words pierced John's chest, but he swallowed the old anger. "This is why I left tonight," he thought. "To breathe without the weight of a crown." "I'll handle the board, Father," he said calmly. "I just needed to see the world differently for a while." Another pause. "John," Prince Adebayo said more softly, "your mother worries. Come home tonight. We will discuss in the morning." John closed his eyes, rain dripping from his lashes. "I can't. Not yet." Before his father could respond, John ended the call. The screen went black, leaving only the reflection of his own troubled face. He tucked the phone back into his pocket and began walking toward the main road. The drizzle had slowed to a mist, and the night air smelled of wet earth and charcoal. Every step felt heavier. The bridge fight, the stolen oranges, Hawa's shy smile, all of it clung to him more fiercely than any billionaire meeting. As he reached the junction near Terminus Market, a lone Keke Napep slowed beside him. The driver, a middle-aged man with tired eyes, leaned out. "Boss, where you dey go this night? Ray no dey fear you?" John almost laughed at the word boss. "Old Airport Road," he said after a moment. The driver nodded. "Enter, make we go." Inside the tricycle, the faint scent of petrol mixed with the sweet perfume of wet hibiscus. John's mind replayed Hawa's words on the bridge. "Sometimes I wonder if anyone will ever love me for me." He clenched his fists. "That is the same question I ask every day." The Keke bounced over potholes until they reached a quiet estate hidden behind tall neem trees. At the gate, a uniformed guard straightened immediately, saluting. "Good evening, sir." John nodded without explanation and slipped inside. The compound stretched wide and silent, the mansion glowing with soft golden lights. He moved like a shadow through the side entrance, avoiding the main door where servants might ask questions. Inside his private wing, he peeled off the soaked hoodie and stared at the torn fabric. Mud streaked his jeans. His knuckles were bruised and swelling from the fight. He looked in the mirror. The reflection that stared back was a strange hybrid, not quite the billionaire prince in tailored suits, not quite the broke wanderer he pretended to be. Somewhere between those worlds stood a man who longed for something money could never buy. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. The door creaked open, and his mother, elegant, even in a simple wrapper, stepped inside. "John?" He turned, startled. "Mother, you're awake. I heard you come in." Her eyes swept over his bruised hands and damp clothes. "What happened to you?" John hesitated. "Nothing serious, just life outside these walls." His mother sighed, moving closer. "You look like your father when he was young. always chasing meaning in the rain. John managed a small smile. Did he ever find it? She brushed wet hair from his forehead. Meaning finds you, my son, when you stop running from who you are. Her gentle words sank deep, but John said nothing. How could he explain that running was the only way he could see the truth? Later that night, long after his mother left, John lay awake in the dark. The sound of dripping rain outside blended with the faint hum of the estate's generator. He pulled Hawa's damp paper from his pocket. Her number was smudged, but still readable. His thumb hovered over his phone. Call her now? It was past midnight. Too soon. Too strange. Instead, he saved the number carefully and placed the phone on the prize. The first light of morning crept through the sheer curtains of John Adewale's room, painting thin gold lines across the polished marble floor. The rain had stopped, leaving the air heavy with the scent of wet neem trees and distant charcoal fires from early morning roadside grills. John stirred awake, still half lost in the dream of Hawa's trembling voice on the bridge. The quiet buzz of his phone dragged him fully into the present. He reached for it and froze. 7 missed calls, all from an unknown number, and beneath them, a single new text. Good morning. This is Hawa. I think someone followed me home last night. John sat up instantly, the cool air stinging his bare skin. His chest tightened as memories of the 3 thugs on the bridge flashed through his mind. He had watched them vanish into the darkness, but what if they had doubled back? What if they had found her house? He reread the text, noticing the faint tremor in the way she typed think, as if she wasn't sure whether fear or imagination had woken her. Another vibration. A fresh message blinked onto the screen. I'm sorry to bother you so early, but someone knocked on our gate before sunrise. When Auntie looked, nobody was there. John's heartbeat quickened. His father's early meeting, the board, the Billionaire deal, all of it dissolved beneath a single, urgent thought. Hawa could be in danger. He typed quickly. Stay inside. Don't open the gate. I'm coming. He hesitated before hitting send. Would those words betray his hidden wealth? A man with nothing shouldn't promise to come at sunrise in a city this wide. He deleted the last sentence and replaced it. Stay inside. I'll call soon. Then he saved the message and jumped to his feet. Inside his walk-in closet, rows of starched shirts and Italian shoes stood like silent witnesses to the double life he had chosen. He reached for another faded hoodie and a pair of scuffed sneakers. The disguise felt safer than the truth. As he laced his shoes, a soft knock came at the door. John? It was his mother. Yes, mother, he called, forcing calm into his voice. The door opened slightly, revealing her gentle face, framed by a silk headscarf. Your father is already in the study, she said. He expects you to join the video call with the investors in 30 minutes. John tightened the laces with deliberate slowness. I'll be there soon. She studied him, her eyes narrowing at the worn clothes. You're leaving again? I just need fresh air before the call. Her gaze lingered on his bruised knuckles. Fresh air? Or something you don't want to name? John met her eyes, but said nothing. She sighed, softly. Your father will not wait forever. Remember that. When the door closed, John grabbed his phone and slipped silently through the side entrance, heart pounding with a mix of urgency and guilt. The city of Jos was waking. Morning muezzins called faithful hearts to prayer. The aroma of fried akara drifted from roadside stalls where women balanced bowls of steaming beans on their heads. Children in neat uniforms hurried toward dusty school gates, their laughter slicing through the crisp harmattan air. John flagged down a KK Napep. Bukuru Railway close, he said quickly. The driver, a young man with sleepy eyes, nodded and sped off, weaving through early morning traffic. As they bounced over potholes, John's thoughts churned. What if the men came back? What if Hawa opened the gate? What if his phone buzzed again? Another message from Hawa. There's a strange car parked across the street. A black SUV. The engine is running, but Nobody has come out. John's grip tightened on the phone. A black SUV. It could be nothing, or everything. He tapped the driver's shoulder. "Please hurry." The driver glanced back. "Oga, road day bad. If I hurry too much, we go fly." "Then fly," John said, his voice sharper than he intended. The driver blinked, startled by the sudden authority in the voice of a man dressed like a broke wanderer. 10 tense minutes later, the keke screeched to a halt at the narrow street leading to Hawa's home. John jumped out before the vehicle fully stopped, splashing through shallow puddles as he sprinted toward the blue metal gate. The early sunlight caught the sleek body of a black SUV parked across the road, its tinted windows glinting like dark mirrors. The engine hummed quietly, sending a thin trail of exhaust into the cold morning air. John slowed, instincts sharpening. The vehicle was too polished for this neighborhood, too deliberate in its stillness. He approached the gate and tapped gently. "Hawa, it's John." A pause. Then Hawa's anxious voice floated through the metal. "John? You came?" "Yes." "Don't open yet. Just tell me, has anyone tried to speak to you?" "No," she said softly. "But the car hasn't moved since before dawn. Auntie says it feels wrong." John turned, eyes locked on the silent SUV. His mind raced through possibilities. Thugs from the bridge, a curious neighbor, or something far more dangerous. The driver's window lowered slowly. A man in a crisp suit leaned out, his face partially hidden by sunglasses. "Good morning, Mr. Adewale," the man said with unnerving calm. "Your father sent me. He requests your immediate return." John's blood ran cold. His disguise had been pierced. Even here, on a quiet street where he was supposed to be a nobody, the crown had found him. From behind the gate, Hawa's voice trembled. "John, why does he know your name?" John stared at the suited man, then at the gate that separated him from the one person who still believed he was ordinary. The walls of his two worlds were collapsing faster than he could rebuild them. A sudden gust of wind rattled the blue gate, carrying the smell of damp soil and fresh morning bread from a nearby kiosk. The man in the tailored suit stepped closer, holding the envelope like a judge presenting a final verdict. The golden Adewale family crest glistened under the faint Joss sunlight. "Sir," the man said, voice calm but firm, "Prince Adebayo requests that you read this immediately." Inside the gate, Hawa's voice trembled. "John, who is this? Why does he call you sir?" John's heart pounded. The thin paper in the man's hand felt heavier than the entire Adewale empire. Every second stretched like a slow drumbeat. He forced his voice to stay even. "Hawa, it's complicated. Please stay inside." But the man in the suit didn't wait. He stepped forward, lowering his tone so only John could hear. "Your father has set a deadline. If you don't respond before noon today, the board will move without you. The family trust will be reassigned." John's stomach tightened. Reassigned. That single word meant losing control of everything. The hotels, the foundation, the investments his mother secretly used to fund scholarships for orphans. Everything would slide into the cold hands of distant relatives who cared only for profit. Still, he stayed silent. He could not break the fragile truth that hovered between him and Hawa, not yet. The man held out the envelope. "Please, sir, this is not a request." John took it slowly. The paper was thick and smooth, faintly scented with his father's signature cologne, a mix of oud and old power. He slipped it into his pocket without opening it. "I'll read it later," he said flatly. The man's jaw tightened. "Prince Adebayo insisted you read it now. He said the decision concerns your personal life as well." Those last words struck like a hidden blade. Personal life. Did his father somehow know about Hawa? Before John could answer, Hawa's auntie's voice cut through the gate, sharp with suspicion. "Who is outside?" "Hawa, step back." Hawa called out quickly. "It's okay, Auntie, is my friend." Friend. The word burned with a bittersweet warmth. The suited man adjusted his sunglasses and gave a polite nod toward the gate. "Good morning, Ma," he said smoothly. "No cause for alarm. I only came to deliver a message." Then, turning back to John, he added, "Sir, your father awaits your reply." Without waiting for permission, he climbed back into the black SUV. The engine hummed, a low, expensive purr. The vehicle rolled away, leaving behind the faint smell of petrol and unanswered questions. Silence returned to the narrow street. Only the distant bleating of a goat broke the heavy air. Hawa's voice came softly through the gate. "John, what is happening? Why did that man call you sir? And what is in that envelope?" John pressed his palm against the cold metal. Every instinct urged him to tell her everything, but revealing his name now would shatter the fragile trust he was trying to build. "It's just family business," he said finally. "Nothing for you to worry about." "Family business?" she echoed. "You talk like a man with people chasing him. Last night we almost got robbed. This morning a stranger comes with a letter. And you still want me to believe you sell small jobs?" John closed his eyes. Her voice carried both fear and quiet strength, the very qualities that had drawn him to her in the first place. "Hawa," he said softly, "I promise I'll explain everything soon. But right now, I just need to know, are you safe?" A pause. Then, more gently, "Yes, I think so." "Good. Please stay inside today. Don't open the gate to anyone you don't know. Not even me, unless you hear my voice." She hesitated. "John, are you in trouble?" His throat tightened. "Not the kind you think. I just need time." Another long silence. Finally, she whispered, "Time is not always our friend." The words cut deep. But before John could reply, a loud honk echoed from the main road. A delivery truck rumbled past, shaking the gate. When the noise faded, Hawa's voice was gone. John stood there for a moment, rain clouds gathering once more over the Joss sky. He pulled the envelope from his pocket. The seal glinted like a dare. "Open it," his mind urged. "Face the decision." But his fingers refused. Not here. Not with Hawa's scent of oranges still clinging to the morning air. He turned and walked toward the junction, each step heavy with questions. The black SUV was long gone, but its echo lingered like a shadow on his chest. Back at the estate, the mansion loomed silent as a secret. Inside his private study, John finally sat at the wide mahogany desk. The room smelled faintly of old books and the lemon polish the servants used each dawn. He broke the seal. Inside lay a single sheet of thick ivory paper. The handwriting was unmistakably his father's strong, deliberate strokes that carried both love and command. John read the words slowly, each sentence tightening around his heart. "My son, the board grows restless. They demand clarity on the succession. I have given them a deadline today, at noon. If you do not appear, I will announce a decision myself. A marriage has been arranged with Chief Balogun's daughter. Signing the agreement secures the merger, protects our assets, and ensures the Adawale name remains untarnished. I expect you to honor this by tonight." John dropped the letter onto the desk. The words blurred as anger surged through him. A marriage? Arranged like a business contract? Images of Hawa's rain-soaked smile flooded his mind. Her quiet dignity, her laughter as oranges rolled across a muddy bridge. And now, his father was demanding he choose between a billionaire empire and the fragile hope of something real. Outside, thunder growled across the plateau sky, as if the heavens themselves questioned his next move. John clenched his fists. He knew one thing with terrifying clarity. Whatever choice he made today would not only define his future, it would either protect Hawa or expose her to a world she might never forgive. The first clap of thunder cracked across the Joss sky just as John Adewale read Hawa's message. The room seemed to shrink around him, the polished mahogany desk suddenly a prison of quiet power. Rain began to patter against the tall windows, a soft but relentless percussion that matched the rising tempo of his heart. Someone just slid a note under our gate. It only says 3 words. "We are watching." John's breath caught. His mind jumped to the 3 thugs on the bridge, to the black SUV, to the suited messenger with his father's letter. Coincidence felt impossible. His phone buzzed again, Hawa calling this time. He answered on the first ring. "John." Her voice shook like a leaf in the wind. They pushed it under while Auntie was boiling water. We didn't see anyone, just the note. What does it mean? "Lock every door," John said quickly. "Stay away from the windows. I'm coming." He stopped mid-sentence. If he went there openly, he risked bringing more danger to her doorstep. And if the threat came from his father's business rivals, any move could be a trap. "John?" Hawa's voice broke through his thoughts. "I'll figure this out," he said, forcing calm. "But you must promise me, don't open the gate for anyone. Not even me, unless you hear my voice. Understand?" "Yes," she whispered. "But, John, who are these people?" He closed his eyes, wishing he could tell her the whole truth. "I'll explain soon. Just trust me." He ended the call and stared at the letter from his father lying on the desk. The words, marriage, merger, and deadline glared back like cold iron. Was this warning connected to the boardroom politics he had tried to escape? Or was it something darker, someone testing how far the Adewale heir would go for an unknown fruit seller? A knock at the door broke the tense silence. "John?" It was his mother again, her voice gentle but urgent. "The investors' meeting is starting. Your father is waiting in the study." John clenched the phone in his fist. "I'll join soon," he said, though every nerve screamed to run in the opposite direction. Minutes later, he entered the grand family study. Prince Adebayo sat behind a massive glass desk, framed by floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and the quiet authority of old money. His tailored agbada gleamed like fresh ivory despite the humid air. "You finally decided to show up," his father said, eyes narrowing at John's worn sneakers and damp hoodie. "Did you read my letter?" "Yes." John's voice was flat. "Then you understand why this marriage is necessary." "I understand your deal with Chief Balogun," John replied. "But I don't agree." His father's jaw tightened. "This is not about agreement. It's about legacy. The board is nervous. They fear scandal. And now," he paused, sliding a phone across the table. "There are threats." John's eyes flicked to the screen. A grainy photo filled the display, a blurred image of a young woman standing near a blue gate. "Hawa, where did you get this?" John demanded, his voice suddenly sharp. "It was sent to my private line at dawn," Prince Adebayo said. "No message, only this picture. Whoever is watching knows about her." John's stomach dropped. "They're targeting her to reach me." His father leaned forward, voice lowering. "Then end it. Choose the marriage. Sign the papers. Protect the empire. This girl cannot follow you where you are going." John's mind raced. He could feel the invisible trap tightening. The note at Hawa's gate. The photo on his father's phone. The arranged marriage waiting like a cage of gold. "Father," he said slowly, "if you care about this family's name, you'll assign guards to Hawa's house quietly, without frightening her." Prince Adebayo studied his son for a long, heavy moment. "You defy me, yet you demand my resources? I protect her, whether you approve or not." The older man's eyes hardened, but a flicker of respect passed through them. Finally, he nodded once. "I will send discreet security. But if harm comes to her because of your stubbornness, the blame will rest on you." That night, rain swept across the plateau in silver sheets. John slipped out of the mansion again, hood drawn low, heading toward Bukuru. Every streetlight seemed sharper, every passing motorcycle a possible threat. When he reached the blue gate, he saw 2 unmarked cars parked at discreet angles, his father's guards, blending into the shadows. He tapped gently on the gate. "It's me," he called. The gate creaked open. Hawa stood there, a shawl wrapped tightly around her shoulders. Her eyes searched his face with a mix of fear and questions. "You came," she whispered. "Of course." John stepped inside, glancing around the quiet compound. The faint glow of a kerosene lamp flickered in the window behind her. Hawa held up a small piece of paper, the threatening note. The words, "We are watching," stared back in bold black strokes. "John," she said, voice breaking, "I don't care about secrets. I just need to know, are we safe with you? Or are you bringing danger to my door?" Her question sliced through the damp night like lightning. John looked at her, the girl who had stood by him on the bridge, who sold oranges to pay her school fees, who still had no idea he was heir to a fortune. This was the moment he had feared since the first night they met. He took a slow breath, rain dripping from his hood. "Hawa," he said quietly, "there are things about me I haven't told you, but if you'll let me, I will keep you safe, no matter what it costs." Her eyes glistened in the dim light. "Then start by telling me who you really are." Cliffhanger for Part 8. Before John could answer, a sudden crash echoed from the far side of the compound, the unmistakable sound of metal scraping against metal, followed by a deep, unfamiliar voice calling his name. "John Attawale, we know you're here." The crash echoed across the quiet compound like a drum of warning, metal against metal, sharp and deliberate. Then came the deep voice, rolling through the damp air with chilling certainty. "John Attawale, we know you're here." Rainwater trickled from the edge of the blue gate, forming tiny rivers that carried the sound deeper into the night. Hawa stiffened, her shawl slipping from her shoulders. "John," she whispered, barely breathing. They know your name." John's pulse pounded like a war drum. His secret, carefully guarded through nights of disguise, was now a weapon in someone else's mouth. He turned quickly, scanning the shadowed yard. 2 unmarked security cars sat parked outside the compound wall, their engines silent. His father's guards were supposed to be watching, but the voice came from inside. Another metallic scrape closer this time made Hawa flinch. Auntie's lamp flickered in the window behind them. He stepped toward the source of the sound, every sense alert. The yard smelled of wet dust and ripe mangoes from a nearby tree. Rain dripped steadily from the corrugated roof, masking small movements. "Who's there?" John called, voice calm but carrying the edge of command. "Show yourself." A low chuckle floated from the darkness beyond the water tank. "Still brave, even when you hide your crown." A figure emerged from behind the tank, tall, broad, shouldered, his face half covered by a soaked scarf, but his eyes gleamed with a predator's patience. Behind him, 2 more shadows appeared, one holding a short iron rod, the other carrying what looked like a phone camera, its small red light blinking. John's jaw tightened. The same trio from the bridge, but this time, they knew his name. The leader stepped forward, boots splashing through puddles. "Good evening, Prince Attawale," he said mockingly. "Or should we say, homeless hero?" John stayed silent, his mind racing. If they had discovered his identity, how? The photo sent to his father, the black SUV. This was more than random street crime. "What do you want?" John asked evenly. The man twirled the iron rod lazily. "Simple. Money. Lots of it. And maybe a little recording of the mighty Attawale heir hiding in a poor girl's yard. Imagine the headlines tomorrow. Billionaire prince pretends to be beggar to hunt women." Hawa gasped softly behind the gate. The words sliced through the fragile trust like a knife. John felt her eyes on his back, felt the tremor of betrayal starting to rise. The leader continued, voice slick with confidence. "Transfer 50 million naira tonight. Or we post the video to every blog in Nigeria by sunrise. Your father will love the scandal." The camera's red light blinked brighter. John's thoughts spun in tight circles. He could fight, but any violence would give them exactly the footage they wanted. He could call his father's guards, but that would confirm everything to Hawa. He could pay, but that would only buy silence for a moment. Behind him, Hawa whispered, "John, is it true? Are you really a prince?" Her voice was soft, but the weight of the question was heavier than the storm clouds above. He turned slightly, meeting her gaze. Rain glistened on her lashes. He saw fear. He saw confusion. But he also saw a tiny flicker of the trust that had survived the bridge, the fight, the threatening note. "Yes," he said quietly, his voice steady despite the pounding in his chest. "My name is John Adewale. My family owns hotels across Nigeria. I came here to see the world without my name." The confession hung in the rain. Soaked air. No more lies. No more hiding. The leader laughed darkly. "Beautiful. Now the poor orange seller knows the truth. Shall we send the video to Daddy?" John stepped forward, the rain plastering his hoodie to his frame. "Listen carefully," he said, his tone cutting through the night like a blade. "You have one chance to walk away. The guards outside are armed. The police are minutes away. Leave now, and I forget your faces." The man with the camera smirked. "Bluff. No one here but us." A faint metallic click answered him from the shadows near the gate. 4 red laser dots blinked onto the leader's chest. His grin faltered. From beyond the wall, a calm voice called out in Hausa, "Drop the weapon. Hands where we can see them." The Adewale security team. John's father had kept his promise. The leader cursed under his breath. He dropped the iron rod with a clatter. His accomplices hesitated, then slowly raised their hands. The yard erupted with movement as 2 guards vaulted the wall, rifles angled low but ready. Within seconds, the intruders were disarmed and forced to their knees in the mud. Hawa gripped the edge of the gate, her eyes wide with shock as the guards secured the men with plastic cuffs. One of the guards approached John and bowed slightly. "Sir, are you unharmed?" John nodded curtly. "Take them to the police." Quietly. "Yes, sir." John watched silently as they disappeared into the rain. When the yard finally fell quiet again, he turned back to Hawa. She stood motionless, the threatening note still clutched in her trembling hand. "You lied to me," she said softly. The words weren't angry. They were wounded. "I hid my name," John admitted, "but everything else, the bridge, the walk, the way I see you, that was real." Hawa shook her head, rain dripping from her shawl. "I don't know what to believe." John stepped closer, his voice low but certain. "Believe this. I came to find someone who could see me, not my father's money. And from the first night we met, you did." Her eyes searched his, looking for something unspoken. Before she could answer, a guard approached. "Sir," he said quietly, "your father requests your immediate return. The board meeting begins in less than an hour. They need your decision." John felt the weight of 2 worlds pressing against his chest. Behind him, the guarded gate to the Adewale Empire. Before him, the fragile connection he'd built with Hawa. He turned back to her, rain softening to a cold mist. The rain had stopped, but the night still breathed damp and heavy over the city of Jos. A faint mist floated above the ground, carrying the smell of wet earth and diesel fumes. John Adewale stood beneath the flickering streetlight outside Hawa's house, his heart torn between 2 worlds that refused to coexist. Her last words echoed in his mind, sharp, trembling, unforgettable. "If you walk away now, don't come back unless you're ready to choose who you really are, the prince your father owns, or the man I thought I knew." He wanted to speak, to promise her that he would return as the man she deserved, not the heir his father had built. But the guard beside the black SUV cleared his throat softly. "Sir," the guard said, "your father is waiting. The meeting begins in 40 minutes. John's jaw tightened. He looked once more at the faint outline of Hawa behind the half-closed gate. For a moment, their eyes met through the drizzle, her gaze steady but full of pain. Then He turned away. The gate creaked shut. The sound was small, but to John it felt like the final note of a song that would haunt him forever. The Adewale estate glowed like a golden fortress when he arrived. Inside, the marble floors gleamed under chandeliers, but the light felt colder than before. Servants whispered as he passed, sensing the tension that followed him like a shadow. In the grand study, Prince Adebayo sat at the long conference table, surrounded by board members in fine agbadas and sleek Western suits. Laptops glowed, pens clicked, and at the far end of the table stood a woman in a scarlet dress, elegant, poised, and watching him with the calm confidence of someone who already owned half his destiny. Lydia Balogun, the daughter of Chief Balogun, the man his father wanted him to marry for business. "John," his father said as he entered, his tone clipped. "We've been waiting." John's eyes flicked to Lydia. She smiled, polite, practiced, emotionless. "Welcome," she said softly. "Your father speaks highly of you." John gave a faint nod, then turned to the board. "I won't take much of your time," he began. "But before we discuss the merger, I need clarity." Prince Adebayo frowned. "Clarity?" "Yes," John said. "About who controls my life, the family, or me?" A low murmur rippled through the boardroom. "John," his father warned, "this is not the time." "It's exactly the time," John interrupted, his voice low but firm. He placed both hands on the table. "I've seen how far this family's name reaches. I've seen its power, and I've seen its shadow. Last night, that shadow reached the doorstep of someone innocent." The room fell silent. Even the air conditioner's hum seemed to pause. Prince Adebayo's face hardened. "You mean the orange seller?" John's head snapped up. "You know about her?" "I know everything, my son," the prince replied evenly. "I know you've been walking the streets in disguise, mingling with traders, fighting thieves in the rain as if you were part of their world." He leaned back, eyes sharp. "You forget who you are." John's throat tightened. "I remember exactly who I am," he said. "I just don't want to become what you are." The room froze. Prince Adebayo's voice turned to thunder. "You will apologize, sign the agreement, and secure this family's future, or walk away with nothing." John met his father's glare, his mind a storm of fear, love, and defiance. He thought of Hawa's trembling hands clutching the threatening note. He thought of her courage on the bridge, her laughter when they shared roasted corn. He took a slow breath. "If wealth demands I abandon what makes me human," he said quietly, "then I'd rather walk barefoot." Gasps rippled across the table. Prince Adebayo rose to his feet. "You would throw away everything for a fruit seller?" John's voice cracked slightly but didn't waver. "For someone real," he said. "For someone who reminds me that all this," he gestured to the glowing table, the board, the fine suits, "means nothing if your soul is empty." Lydia Balogun studied him silently, then gave a small, understanding nod. When she spoke, her tone was calm but steady. "Prince Adebayo," she said, "perhaps forcing this union is not the way forward. A partnership built on obligation will rot faster than one built on trust." The prince's eyes flicked to her, surprised. "You would walk away from this deal?" She smiled, faintly. "I'd rather marry a man who chooses me, not one who's cornered into it." For the first time, the room fell into a different kind of silence, one not born of anger, but revelation. Prince Adebayo sank slowly back into his chair, his age showing for the first time. "John," he said quietly, "you have no idea what the world does to men who follow their hearts." "Maybe not," John replied softly, "but I'm ready to find out." He turned and walked out before anyone could stop him. Outside, the air felt lighter. He didn't know what waited for him, ruin, freedom, or both, but he knew where he was going. Back to Hawa. The black SUV roared to life as he climbed in. "Take me to Bukuru," he told the driver. Now, as the car sped through the city streets, The skyline of Jos glowed faintly against the dawn, but a knot of unease twisted in his gut. Something felt wrong. When he reached Hawa's street, the air smelled faintly of smoke. The blue gate stood half open, one hinge bent. A small crowd had gathered. Whispers rippled through the mist. John's heart pounded as he stepped out of the SUV. Auntie stood by the gate, her wrapper soaked, her eyes red. When she saw John, she covered her mouth with trembling fingers. "John," she whispered. "She's gone." His voice broke. "What do you mean gone?" "They took her," Auntie said, tears mixing with rain. "Before dawn. 2 men in a van. They left another note." She handed him a crumpled paper. 3 words were scrawled in bold black ink. "Pay the price." John's hands shook as he read it. The mist thickened around him, swallowing the morning light. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rumbled again, low and slow, like the growl of fate. He looked up at the gray sky, his chest burning. "Hawa," he whispered. This time, it wasn't a name. It was a vow. Cliffhanger for part 1, 0 finale. John clenched the note in his fist and turned to the guards behind him. "Find her," he said, his voice cold and calm. "Whatever it takes." But deep inside, he knew that to save Hawa, he might have to give up everything. His name, his inheritance, and the last shield between her and the men who wanted to destroy them both. The dawn over Jos was heavy and gray, like a sky holding its breath. The smell of wet dust and burnt wood still lingered from the night before. In the middle of the quiet street, John Adderwale stood motionless, clutching the crumpled note that screamed 3 words louder than any thunder could pay the price. Around him, the world seemed to fade. The hum of early traffic, the murmurs of curious neighbors, the weak morning light struggling through the clouds all disappeared into silence. Only one thought remained. They have Hawa. He tucked the note carefully into his pocket, then turned to the 2 guards standing nearby. Their faces were grim, their uniforms soaked from the morning drizzle. "Check every road leaving Jos," he said quietly. "Every camera, every fuel station. Find that van." "Yes, sir," one replied before they hurried off. Auntie clutched her shawl, her voice breaking. They came before dawn, shouting her name. She tried to run, but they dragged her. One of them said, "Something about you." John closed his eyes. It was his world. The world he'd tried to escape that had found her. His deception had drawn danger to her doorstep. He pulled out his phone, dialed a number he'd sworn never to call. "Father," he said the moment the line connected. "They took Hawa." There was a pause. Then Prince Adebayo's voice came, deep and measured. "Where?" "Bukaru." "Before dawn." They left a note. "Stay there," his father ordered. "I'm sending a team." "Don't send the board's men," John said sharply. "They'll make this worse. I'll handle it." "John." He ended the call before his father could finish. There was no more room for argument. Hours passed in a blur of phone calls and rain. By afternoon, one of the guards returned breathless. Mud splattered up his boots. "Sir, we found the van," he said. "Abandoned near an old quarry road outside Jos." John's heart thudded. "Show me." The quarry was silent, except for the drip of water from jagged rocks. A faint trail of footprints led to an old warehouse half hidden by weeds and rusted corrugated iron. John moved quietly, his steps sure, his jaw set. The air smelled of petrol and damp metal. He pushed open the door. The dim interior flickered with the glow of a dying lantern. And there, tied to a wooden chair, in the center of the room was Hawa. Her face was pale, her wrists bound, but her eyes burned with defiance. "John," she whispered when she saw him. "I knew you'd come." He rushed to her side, cutting through the ropes with a small knife from his pocket. "You're safe now," he said, though his own voice trembled. Before he could help her stand, a slow clap echoed from the shadows. "Well done, Prince Adewale." The leader of the bridge thugs stepped out, his scar glistening under the lantern light. 2 more men appeared behind him, guns in hand. "You really love this girl, eh?" The leader sneered. "Good, that makes it easier." John's muscles tensed. "What do you want?" The man grinned. "What I've always wanted. Money. 50 million. Or she disappears again, this time for good." John's mind raced. He had the power to make the transfer in seconds, but he also knew men like this never stopped once they tasted blood. He reached slowly into his jacket pocket, pretending to reach for his phone. Instead, he pressed a small silver button clipped to his wristwatch, the silent distress signal that alerted his father's private security. "Let her go," John said, his voice calm, controlled. "You'll get your money." The leader laughed. "Smart. But I know you're kind. You'll send soldiers to finish us. So she stays until we see the alert." He stepped closer, pointing the gun at Hawa. "Now, Prince, make the call." John's hands were steady as he took out his phone and dialed. But before he could speak, Hawa's eyes flicked toward the broken window behind the leader. Outside, faint red dots flickered through the mist. The guards were already in position. She looked back at John and gave the tiniest shake of her head, a warning not to act too soon. But fate didn't wait for timing. One of the thugs shifted nervously, glancing toward the door. The sound of boots crunching on gravel grew louder. The leader cursed, swinging the gun toward the noise. "Who's out there?" At that same moment, John moved. He lunged forward, grabbing the leader's wrist, twisting the gun away. The shot exploded, echoing through the warehouse like a cannon. Hawa screamed. The 2 guards outside stormed in. In seconds, the fight was over. 2 men down, 1 captured. The leader lay groaning on the floor, clutching his shoulder. John dropped the gun and turned to Hawa, breathless. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head, tears mixing with sweat and dust. "I'm fine. But you..." He smiled weakly. A thin line of blood traced down his arm from where the bullet had grazed him. "I've had worse board meetings." Despite the chaos, Hawa gave a shaky laugh, soft, trembling, but real. By evening, the police had taken the men away. The quarry fell silent again, the storm clouds drifting apart. John and Hawa sat on the steps of the warehouse, watching the fading sun turn the wet rocks gold. "You should hate me," he said quietly, "for lying to you, for bringing this here." Hawa was silent for a long moment. Then she said, "I don't hate you, John. But I need to know, who are you now? The prince who hides behind money? Or the man who fought for me on that bridge?" He looked at her, eyes tired but steady. "I don't know if I can be one without losing the other," he said. "But I know what I want, to be a man who doesn't have to pretend to find truth." She reached for his hand, her fingers warm against his bruised skin. "Then stop pretending," she whispered. Weeks passed. The scandal faded. The board found new deals, and the Adewale name survived another storm. But something had changed. John no longer wore his crown with pride, only with purpose. One quiet evening, he returned to Bukuru, not in disguise this time, but as himself. The blue gate was freshly painted. Hawa stood waiting under the neem tree, wearing the same shy smile that had undone him from the start. He walked toward her. No guards, no pretense, just a man and the woman who had shown him the cost of truth. "I kept my promise," he said softly. "I came back." She nodded, eyes glistening. "And this time," she whispered, "don't leave as a prince. Stay as John." He smiled, the first real smile in months, and for the first time, the name Adewale felt lighter, not a chain, but a story he could finally write for himself. That night, the wind carried the scent of roasted maize and rain-washed soil. Somewhere in the distance, a drumbeat rose from a nearby wedding. Echoing through the quiet Jos evening, John looked up at the darkening sky, his hands still in Hawa's, and whispered, "Maybe the richest man is not the one who owns the world, but the one who finally finds peace."